Almost through the week. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Happy Thursday. I'm Greg Bishop with the Center Square. Wake up with us each and every weekday morning at 8 a.m. Central Time here on YouTube, where you can join the live chats. I'm a lively bunch there, sounding off on all kinds of things. But you can also get the podcast where you get podcasts each morning. Just search Illinois in Focus. You'll find it. Don't forget, you can get the newsletter, headlines in your inbox each and every weekday morning as well. Go to thecentersquare.com and sign up for that. We got a couple things to tackle. Of course, here we are in the thick of legislative session at the State House in Illinois. What are the priorities from majority Democrats versus what minority Republicans are looking to accomplish? We'll hear some of that. We'll also hear about a lawsuit that was filed, a federal discrimination case against the Illinois State Board of Education over funding affinity groups. Awake Illinois, a nonprofit group advocating for the social welfare of families and parents in schools and elsewhere. They went in front of the State Board of Education and revealed that they're suing in the Department of Education at the federal level to hold the State Board of Education accountable. So we'll hear about that as well. But coming up next, we got to check out what's going on in Washington, D.C. We'll connect with Casey Harper, the Center Square's bureau chief over in Washington, D.C., and we'll talk tariffs, we'll talk Doge, we'll talk the border, and so much more. Stay tuned. It's right here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning here with the Center Square.
So when President Trump introduced tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China, and then suspended Mexico and Canada tariffs, some of them, there was a 2-day period between a Tuesday and a Thursday. In those 2 days, corn futures dropped 8.6%, soybean futures dropped 5%, literally in 2 days.
That's Illinois Department of Agriculture Director Jerry Costello earlier this week testifying in front of a House Ag Committee here in Springfield about the impacts of tariffs on the farming community. There was other testimony about cuts and freezes of federal spending and so on. Of course, it hasn't even been a full 2 months or so of President Donald Trump being in office, and how things have been shaken up. To join us to talk more about this here with Illinois in Focus Daily, let's talk with Casey Harper. He is the bureau chief over in Washington, D.C., joining us live here. Casey, good morning. You've been obviously watching closely what's happening with the new Trump administration. When we talk about tariffs, we're hearing the Democrats' line of attack being, this is a tax increase on consumers, on businesses in the United States. It's just going to increase taxes. What's really behind the Trump tariffs, and what has the president been saying the past few weeks as to the impacts on the economy, the stock market, and prices and such?
Yeah, well, thanks, Greg. It's a complicated issue. I think it's good we're taking some time to look into it because there's a few different motives and there are a few different impacts. I mean, when you talk about what's behind it, was your question, what's behind Trump doing this? I mean, we can talk about the impact on consumers, and I think we should, and we can talk about the dollars and cents. But I think the greater motive behind it for President Trump is resetting really the global economic order. I think President Trump has been really clear, even since 2016, that he feels that the rest of the world takes advantage of the United States. And that's really a theme of his criticism of other nations and even our allies. He thinks that, the U.S. has, when you think about the maritime global order, that the U.S. is getting a raw deal, that we pay for the defense of nations all around the world. We have this nuclear umbrella that extends, to to different parts of the world. We pay defense budgets. For example, Trump is supposed to meet with the NATO general today, and he has famously complained for a long time that the U.S. pays for NATO's defense, and the NATO member countries in Europe, they don't pay what they agreed to pay. And what they pay is really very, very small for military defense compared to what the U.S. pays. And so that may seem unrelated to tariffs, but I think in Trump's mind, it's really not, because it hits that general theme that America should be put first, that we're being ripped off by the rest of the world. And so then that comes to the practical policy. Now, a tariff is really, a tax on an import, right? A tax on things that are made overseas and sold here. He started off by going after China. I think this is widely a popular move. He did a 10% tariff on Chinese goods, and then a 20%. He's upped it now. And so I think that's broadly popular. You don't hear him get a lot of criticism for that. It's true that China has taken advantage of the U.S. for a while. They do different things like manipulate their currency. They've also been taking advantage of tax loopholes for a while, something he closed, is not reported on much except at the centersquare.com and a few other places. But there's something called the de minimis exception that allowed these Chinese companies to ship, billions of dollars of consumer goods to the U.S. and not pay taxes on it, while American companies were paying taxes. And so he closed that loophole. He's put the tariffs on China. But what's got most of the news, Greg, as I'm sure you want to talk about, is what's going on with the EU, what's going on with Canada, what's going on with Mexico, and how it'll impact U.S. consumers. And I think that depending on how it shakes out, it could make things more expensive for Americans, but there's a lot of unknowns right now.
The president, when he had that joint session in front of Congress with the, it wasn't a State of the Union speech, it was just a speech in front of a joint session. But regardless, he talked about how, there might be some pain here. And he even reflected back to his first term when he was getting that deal with China put together before COVID hit. And farmers were a little up in arms at first, but Trump said, hold on, bear with me, we'll get through this hump. And then, they did see some returns, however, then COVID hit. But talk about what the president's acknowledged here, right? I mean, there is going to be an economic, I don't know if you call it a speed bump or an economic blip or a term. He doesn't want to use the word recession, but are we going to experience that for the potential of long-term gains down the line?
Yeah, you're right. It was a very interesting admission from President Trump that there would be pain. The president almost never admits something like that. He's usually very optimistic. It's all about winning. He's winning. We're winning. America's winning. And that's his message. But for him to acknowledge there's going to be some pain, it caught my attention as well, Greg. And I think that we should take him seriously when he gives that warning, because it's probably true. Now, there's a few things going on here. I mean, one is there's a lot of Republicans who have not really spoken out against these tariffs yet because they say they're just negotiating tactics and that Trump actually isn't going to implement all these tariffs long term. He's just using them to get concessions from different countries. And if that's true, then I think the tariffs will be really beneficial to a lot of Americans. It maybe get some good policies from other countries. We've seen pledges, for instance, from Canada and Mexico, at least initially, to up the border security and help take on the fentanyl issue, which is a very big problem in the U.S. So as a negotiating tool, I think the tariffs have a lot of potential, and Trump has been able to get some success there. Now, when it seems that the problem has grown, though, because we're seeing an escalating trade war. Just today, or just recently, I believe it was today, Trump threatened a 200% tariff on alcohol imported from the EU because they put a 50% tariff on American whiskey. Canada also put a tariff on whiskey. And, Ontario threatened they were going to charge the U.S. more for electricity, but then they reneged on it. There's a lot of chaos here, Greg. And I think, Trump does well in chaos. He thrives in these negotiating, chaotic environments. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the end, he comes out with a decent deal for Americans, but there's going to be a lot of chaos along the way. We're seeing that reflected in the stock market, which doesn't like the chaos. It's been struggling lately. Generally, in principle, though, with all that being said, the deals may end up good. Yes, tariffs will raise prices on Americans. Now, there are some benefits potentially to tariffs, such as encouraging manufacturing and domestic production. And I think we've already seen some domestic, Apple did a major investment in the U.S. We've seen other companies announce investments in the U.S. So those are long-term benefits, and tariff price changes are going to be felt very quickly, whereas the benefits of tariffs of any domestic manufacturing Trump is able to conjure up, it may take us a while to see those benefits.
From the Washington, D.C. Bureau for the Center Square, we're talking with Casey Harper here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Tariffs obviously going to be continued debate. We're hearing it on the Illinois House floor. Almost every day they're in session, Democrats getting up, talking about the policy they say is bad. Republicans kind of pushing back and saying that that's what Trump got elected to do, is to stand up for America and such. So we're really seeing the national political debate, fine-tuned down into states like Illinois. Something else that has been on the lips of Illinois Democrats is Elon Musk. His name was brought up multiple times yesterday on the House floor, just in passing on points of personal privilege, and all throughout the halls of the State House. People are calling him, the president and the co-president, and saying that he's the one that's really running the show here. But there seems to just be a level of disdain for the Doge efforts, the Department of Government Efficiency efforts that Musk is moving forward with. How is this playing out? How close, and how transparent are their efforts and what they're finding? And is this going to result in some net positives for taxpayers?
Yeah, well, we could talk about why Democrats hate Elon Musk. I think there's a few reasons for that. But speaking on Doge specifically, Doge has had some big wins. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's been a little bit of a bumpy road. That, for instance, they sent out that email saying you need to send us 5 things you did last week. And that created a lot of controversy, even some of Trump's own cabinet members saying, don't answer that email. And I think this is a great case of how example of how the Trump administration wins these news cycles, even if it is kind of chaotic and a little unorthodox and unprofessional, because in some sense they looked bad by sending out having that confusion. But ultimately, the chaos got all the attention on Trump and these cuts. It's all we've been talking about. It's all the media has been writing about is these Doge cuts. So that's one. He got the attention, and that's everything in today's media economy. And then, another thing to think about here is, what did Americans take away from that? Wait a minute. These federal employees are actually upset that they have to send one email, 5 things they did last week. I mean, if you're a teacher working 50 hours a week, or a construction guy in the heat all day, it's like, I could think of 5 things I did last week. You can't do that sitting in there in the kind of picture, the image that's been created, somebody sitting in their bathrobe working from home on some government contract, doing nothing. So I think they're winning some of these optics. And then the examples, I mean, you mentioned Trump's joint address. He was able to throw out a lot of examples that just were indefensible. I mean, talking about transgender operas and funding, propaganda overseas. I mean, there's just so many of these examples that are winning with Americans. I mean, polling shows Americans believe there is waste in the federal government. They really want to cut it. Democrats are not going to be able to convince Americans there's no waste in the government. I don't think they are, but I think they're maybe making a political mistake here by being so anti-Musk and Doge. I think they might be smarter to highlight the things they like that are being cut, and then be the voice of reason in the room. I think that's actually where Democrats could succeed, is if they said, hey, we agree with your heart here, but we want to be the voice of reason, because Trump is often seen as unreasonable. But they're not doing that. They are being kind of unreasonable when they showed that at the joint address, where they kind of stood up, they made a lot of antics. And even with a kind of chaotic, one-of-a-kind president like Trump, Democrats right now seem like the more unreasonable, the more emotional party who's disunified and not quite sure. As much as they dislike Trump and Musk, they're not quite sure how to stop them.
But there are some implications that are being felt on the ground. I do want to play another clip of the Illinois Department of Agriculture director. And Casey, you may not hear this down the line. I'll reiterate it for you. But he's talking about a program that gets federal funds, and those program dollars have been frozen as of right now.
The Trump administration has unilaterally cut or withheld funds that Congress has contractually authorized. Here's an example of some of those programs. LFPA, Local Food Purchase Assistance, $43.5 million in that program. About $18 million is still owed to the state of Illinois.
So Costello saying $18 million of the local food purchase program funded by federal tax dollars has not been given to Illinois. And then you have even the Illinois Department of Natural Resources talking about, certain dollars that go to rural volunteer fire departments that they're not able to get from the federal government, at least at this time. Casey, there's a lot of legal fighting and wrangling about these dollars. Of course, all of this coming as you've got a potential vote on some kind of stopgap spending bill and the politics of that. Is this going to be resolved? Are we going to see, some light at the end of the tunnel in the next few months?
Well, I mean, for Trump and the Republicans' sake, they should hope they get it resolved. I think right now, Trump is in his honeymoon phase. He's in his first 100 days. He has demonstrated through all these examples of wasteful spending that there needs to be major cuts. We have a $36 trillion deficit. The Congressional Budget Office just came out and said we're on track to have a $2 trillion deficit this fiscal year. And so it's not hard to convince Americans that the federal government is in crisis, spending's out of control, and there's a lot of waste. And so I think, it's not good to have for Republicans to have these real impacts, like the food bank, example you just played, and there are many others around the country. But right now, I think they're in a grace period. And as long as they figure some of these things out in the next few months, I think Americans are going to have enough patience with this. Now, if a year, 2 years go by and we're still in this period of chaos, I think some fatigue is going to set in. Republicans are going to feel it in the polls and in the polling. But right now, they're in this grace period. First 100 days, I think it will even go beyond that. The honeymoon phase is protecting Trump from a lot of these things. And you could say, what do you expect? We're cutting billions of dollars in federal government. There's going to be some hiccups along the way. As long as they kind of resolve some of this stuff and make it a little more organized in the next few months, I don't think it's going to be fatal to them to have these real world impacts. And some of it will be restored. And Trump has shown a willingness when there's real pain points to address them, the way he did with American motor companies and his tariffs. So if there is a real outcry, he's willing to change policies. And that's been to his benefit so far.
Well, I've kept Casey long enough here, but one final thing I want to discuss is the border situation. Obviously, that was something that Trump hit hard as he was running for president. Illinois impacted by that with the 50+ thousand non-citizen migrants that ended up in Chicago with the billions of dollars that's been spent. The taxpayer subsidies for non-citizen health care in the state of Illinois is billions of dollars and projected to be more. There are efforts to make the state of Illinois an even stronger sanctuary state. How is Trump going to, essentially deal with these types of states that have these sanctuary jurisdictions?
It's an interesting question. Trump has shown a willingness so far to defund states that don't come into line with his agenda. He just defunded Maine in many respects for their unwillingness to ban transgender athletes from competing in girls' sports. And that's a very popular issue, by the way. Republicans poll very well on that. They have wide support among Americans. And on the border issue, actually, Trump has wide support as well. It's one of the main reasons he won. His best line of the joint address was when he said, Democrats said we needed a new legislation to fix the border. Turns out all we needed was a new president. And he got major applause for that. It was probably his best line of the night because it's his biggest win. He has almost entirely shut down the border. He's initiated one of the biggest deportation efforts we've seen in a long time. And there's really no major uproar or there's no daily news cycles of sad grandmothers being pulled away from their children, like things that, could be fodder for Democrats to attack the president. It just hasn't materialized, I think, because they've been wrongly obsessed with Elon Musk and Doge. It's almost given cover to Trump's deportation effort. But when it comes to these states, he's got a battle on his hands. States like Illinois, California, they're spending a lot of money on these illegal immigrants. But I think that issue is not as popular for Democrats as it once was. And then we saw for instance, black voters really complaining about this issue, that illegal immigrants are getting more government aid than they are. We saw that was viral in the last presidential campaign. Legally, I think that there is a battle to be fought against these sanctuary cities. Trump has the power, especially with Congress behind him, to revoke some federal funding to some of these cities. And it just remains a question of how far he wants to go and how much these Democratic mayors and leaders in places like Chicago and Illinois are willing to die on this hill, because they might have to.
Casey Harper, he is the reporter for the Center Square out of Washington, D.C. Greatly appreciate your time. We'll connect again in the near future and stay updated with how Washington, D.C. is impacting states like Illinois and beyond. So greatly appreciate you, and we'll talk again in the near future, all right?
Thanks.
It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning here for Illinois in Focus Daily.
And in every way, working families will pick up the bill for tax cuts for billionaires. We'll pay more every day for purchases because of the Trump trade tax.
One of the biggest concerns I hear time and time again from my constituents is frustration with the state's broken tax system. But instead of addressing it, Democrat lawmakers continually spend their time criticizing the new administration's federal trade policies while ignoring the tax burdens they've created right here in Illinois.
It's just some of the kind of back and forth in the contrast you're seeing at the Illinois State House in debates about what the priorities are. Welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and wake up with us each and every weekday morning here to get the latest on what's happening at the Illinois State House. As the associate editor for Illinois, I watch closely what happens when legislators are in session. The House was in session yesterday, and during points of personal privilege, they had the opportunity to share some of their thoughts, including, hey, I got constituents here from my district. I've got family here from across the way, or they'll even get up and make some political points like Democratic State Representative Anna Moeller did yesterday.
Since 1965, Medicaid has been a lifeline for millions of Illinoisans, ensuring that children, seniors, and people with disabilities receive essential care. But today, that lifeline is under attack. The Trump administration and Republicans in Congress are pushing massive funding cuts. And if they succeed, the consequences will be catastrophic.
She went on from there to read about what she sees as the problems of the Trump administration looking to shore up the costs for social welfare programs like Social Security or Medicaid and so on.
And we learned that Medicaid is crucial to our economy. Last year, hospitals and health systems generated roughly $118 billion for the state and created 440,000 full-time jobs. These providers, along with 240,000 other caregivers, depend on Medicaid payments. The Medicaid expansion Medicaid expansion alone is estimated to account for 55,000 jobs.
So the economic impact of any potential reductions in Medicaid spending that Democrats are warning about could impact, again, jobs and hospitals and such. Moeller continued yesterday on the House floor to raise concerns.
And while Trump and his allies spent the last week claiming that their plans would not cut Medicaid, a report from the Congressional Budget Office released on Friday showed the truth. The Trump plan and the resolution passed in the House by the Republican majority cuts $880 billion over the next 10 years and includes devastating cuts to Medicaid.
So, those cuts over the next 10 years, you got to look at that annually. And is that going to be cleaning up waste and fraud and abuse, or is it going to be cutting of benefits for people who deserve them? The rhetoric you've got to be able to hear throughout, but then to also understand what the reality may be and may not be. Are these talking points really just to be a cudgel, as Republicans say, or is it based in fact and reality? Obviously, we've been hearing Democrats, at least here in the Illinois State House, raising this issue and trying to get the public activated to show up to town halls and flood Republican members of Congress and the legislature with phone calls to encourage them to oppose Trump and oppose Musk desk and so on. But Republicans in Illinois, they seem to be trying to highlight what they see as hypocrisy from the majority Democrats, critical of the federal government without looking at their own house. Here's Jennifer Salentriano, Republican State House member.
One of the biggest concerns I hear time and time again from my constituents is frustration with the state's broken tax system. But instead of addressing it, Democrat lawmakers continually spend their time criticizing the new administration's federal trade policies while ignoring the tax burdens they've created right here in Illinois. Illinois families already face the highest state and local tax burden in the nation. Instead of fixing it, the governor has proposed the largest budget in state history at $55.2 billion. This massive spending plan will not fix our tax system. It will only make things worse for hardworking families and businesses.
Sorry, that's State Representative Jennifer Sanalitro, who was joined by other Republicans at a news conference Tuesday, saying that Democrats have misguided priorities. And they highlighted all kinds of different bills. State Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer there as well, highlighting what he says are just confusing policy priorities. Here's C.D. Davidsmeyer.
What are some of the other doozies that we're seeing that Democrats have put out? Let's see, there's House Bill 3518, which would legalize prostitution. There's a bill to make obesity a protected class rather than focusing on health care and improving people's health care and improving that for the entire health care system. We're just going to make obesity a protected class. The no voter ID, okay, no voter ID. They're talking about they won't allow voter ID, but they want to make sure that we can vote from prison. What about environmental justice communities, or eliminating grocery bags or plastic silverware bans and more Green New Deal scams? None of these bad bills will reduce the cost of living for Illinois families. I think I've made my point. The Democrat supermajority needs to stop tripping on mushrooms, magic mushrooms, and yes, there is a bill for that. And they need to get down to focusing on what helps Illinois families.
So that was just some points Republicans made on Tuesday during a news conference. And then you had other Republicans hold a news conference yesterday to discuss public safety concerns that they have. Here is State Representative Patrick Windhorst, the floor leader for Republicans, laying out how he feels Democrats have not done good when it comes to public safety policies.
What I have seen from legislators on the other side of the aisle has been a constant push to pass legislation that has seriously degraded our police officers' ability to do their jobs effectively. They have elevated the rights of criminals and eroded the rights of victims. House Republicans have fought the Safety Act, warning our fellow citizens that the law would harm our law enforcement officers and our court system, while increasing risks to public safety.
He went on to discuss the Safety Act in some detail. And we've talked a lot about the Safety Act and the Pretrial Fairness Act. We had a review of Illinois Supreme Court cases yesterday, touching on the end of cash bail statewide and how it's being implemented. And apparently, there's still a lot of questions and some holes in the law that have prosecutors and judges being challenged in the courts for the decisions they're making moving forward with implementing no cash bail. But Windhorst laid out some policies that they're hoping to get across the finish line as minority Republicans to clean up the no cash bail and to address some other public safety concerns that Republicans have.
As we know, with the Safety Act, there has been the elimination of cash bail in our state. House Republicans fought against the Safety Act and have advocated for its repeal, including a return to cash bail. But we have to acknowledge the realities here in the General Assembly and the current makeup of our body. So with that reality, we have put together some bills that we think will improve public safety and make sure that those who are committing crimes are held responsible for those crimes. First, HB 1482 would expand what we call the detention net for those arrested to all felonies. Currently, only certain felonies are eligible for detention under the Safety Act. This bill would say that a judge would have discretion to hold anyone committing a felony prior to trial in custody. That way, we are putting the decision in the judge's discretion. One of the arguments made by the other side of the aisle in support of eliminating cash bail was that it should be judges making the decision on whether someone's in or out of jail. However, our current law doesn't give judges complete discretion. This bill would do that.
So he lays out another measure within that bill they say would help with public safety. There's also another measure to ultimately bring more penalties for adults who leave fentanyl laying around and poison their children with it. So clearly some public safety concerns. John Cabello, one of three members of law enforcement that are in the General Assembly, he spelled out the Safety Act is really harming police morale.
Can answer that one. The Safety Act makes law enforcement's job almost impossible. There's talk of a Safety Act 2.0. We haven't even seen the full ramifications of what the Safety Act has truly done. The Democrats and this multi-billionaire governor has decimated our law enforcement. Morale is lowest that I've ever seen. We can't get police officers to do the job anymore. And there's one party that is at fault for this. There is one party that has taken it to a new level, the new level of standing with the criminals instead of standing with law-abiding citizens and the police.
A lot of politics being played out here, and we'll bring you the latest each and every weekday morning. That's why you need to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell with us here at Illinois in Focus Daily each and every weekday morning. And get the newsletter in your inbox by signing up at thecentersquare.com. Also, get the podcast where you get podcasts and follow us on social media. And you can follow me on social media. Just search Bishop on Air, and we can connect that way. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. Much more ahead each and every weekday morning. Files federal discrimination complaints against the Illinois State Board of Education. This dropping yesterday from Awake, Illinois. Good morning, I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here for Illinois in Focus Daily. Get the newsletter where you get newsletters. Just go to thecentersquare.com and sign up there, and get the podcast each and every weekday morning as well. So yesterday, the Illinois State Board of Education met at the Plainfield School District, where they held a regular scheduled ISB meeting, discussing a variety of things and all the great things that Plainfield School is doing and so on. But they also had a moment for the public to address the State Board of Education, and one in particular was Shannon Adcock, the president of Awake, Illinois. That is a social welfare advocacy group, and she revealed a federal discrimination complaint filed against the State Board of Education. Getting a copy of the complaint here, and you can see it at thecentersquare.com. And we'll have this up a little bit, but I'll just let Shannon's words speak for herself at yesterday's board meeting in front of the State Board of Education as to why she is bringing this complaint to the U.S. Department of Education to investigate the Illinois State Board of Education.
My name is Shannon Adcock, and I am president of Awake, Illinois, a nonprofit social welfare advocacy organization. On March 10th, Awake, Illinois filed a federal civil rights complaint against the Illinois State Board of Education for discrimination on the basis of race in violation of both Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Special thanks to Parents Defending Education for leading the way nationally on civil rights protection efforts. This board promotes and in 2024 funded $1 million to an initiative via Teach Plus that leads affinity group programming that states, quote, some groups are only open to educators of color, end quote, and states affinity groups are focused on racial identity plus other intersectionality markers. Excluding teachers from affinity groups because of their race blatantly violates the Equal Protection Clause. Programming cannot use race to favor certain educators at the expense of equal opportunity for others. Given the $2.25 billion of federal funding that has been requested from ISB, fiscal stewardship would demand no funds be appropriated to unconstitutional programming. To do so puts those funds in jeopardy. Per the NAEP report for Illinois 4th graders and 8th graders, literacy rates are the lowest they've been in over 20 years. 61% of Illinois students aren't reading at grade level. Dozens of Chicago schools have 0 children reading at grade level. As students still recover from disastrous school closures, these results are unacceptable for a state education agency that is budgeting $11.4 billion with a B for 2026. Money funneled into educator affinity groups is not helping children, including Black or Hispanic students who have shown no change in the performance gap in 20 years. Would it not behoove the state board to direct money to improving literacy for all Illinois students and retention of all Illinois educators, regardless of race? Superintendent Sanders, you had stipulated that you have no way of making up for lost federal funding. May I suggest, stop funding woke programming. The number one priority in our classrooms is literacy. So this is our first civil rights complaint against the Illinois State Board of Education. We have a stack in queue to hold public education accountable to the children. Where many people in the state have stopped fighting for kids, we at Awake Illinois cannot and will not stop speaking for children. On behalf of Awake Illinois, I'm Shannon Adcock. We cannot be canceled. Thank you.
So, Ms. Adcock sharing her thoughts in front of the State Board of Education and revealing this federal discrimination lawsuit. And just to read a bit more here from the article you can find at the Center Square I put together. Discrimination on the basis of race raises concerns that the Illinois State Board of Education has received federal dollars in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which declares that no person in the United States shall, on the ground of race, color, national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to the discrimination under any program or any activity receiving federal financial assistance. Excluding teachers from state-funded affinity groups because of their race blatantly violates the Equal Protection Clause. So they're asking for the U.S. Department of Education to investigate this and to take swift action. Now, I did reach out to the Illinois State Board of Education, and the spokesperson told me that they cannot comment on matters pending before the Office of Civil Rights. So clearly, we'll have to track this, and as Adcock said, she's got several other discrimination and accountability complaints that she's got in queue. So we may see more of this. But obviously, the issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, the issue of affinity groups, these are things that have come into crystal clear focus with the Trump administration moving forward, and with his executive orders and the questions that we reviewed several weeks ago with the State Board of Education not complying with those DEI orders. You've got the dust up at the U.S. Department of Education with reports that there are layoffs there and the possible closure of the Department of Education, how that's going to impact things like this, how that's going to impact federal funds. And as ISB said a couple of weeks ago, if they lose out on $2.some-odd billion, they have no way of making up for that. So where we go from here, we'll be watching closely. Again, that's why you need to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell and wake up with us here with Illinois in Focus Daily each and every weekday morning as we give you what you need to know to get your day going here. All right. So make it happen. Get the newsletter, get the podcast, get the segments, and subscribe today. It's Illinois in Focus Daily with the Center Square. that's all I got for you today. It's only Thursday. We're almost to Friday, folks. We'll see what we can get together for tomorrow's show, but definitely be here for it live at 8 a.m. here with the Center Square on YouTube. Until then, have yourselves a great day. Enjoy the sunshine if you've got it, but apparently we've got some storms coming our way this weekend. And St. Patrick's Day parades. How are those going to go? I don't know. I think I'm going to check out the one in Springfield and tell you about that on Monday if we get to it. All right, have a great day. We'll see you back here with Illinois in Focus Daily each and every weekday morning with the Center Square on YouTube.